what is going on in the world of Lord of the Rings?
So a lot, so for people who don't know, it looks like we're going to be waiting to the end of July for an official trailer finally. And then rumor has it that the first episode, I believe, is going to appear in theaters. So, there's that to go with. I think Amazon's probably going to try and make as much money from this as possible. That I think they're going to do the whole theater thing because of people's curiosity. But we also have confirmation that the Rings of Power will have female orcs. And to my understanding, and if I understand it, which I may not, feel free to correct me. I'm sure people will. I probably don't even need to say that. But I think it was I think Tolkien kind of went back and forth on the idea of female orcs. But I think what was kind of settled, at least Christopher Tolkien settled it, was that all orcs multiply. So they were corrupted, and basically there aren't any female orcs. They just multiply. But you have in things like The Hobbit.
Like gremlins?
Like what?
Like gremlins? Like they pop out of the backs of other gremlins? So
yeah,
like when a
when a
gremlin gets wet, more gremlins pop out of the backs of the gremlins.
Yeah, I guess.
Have you never seen Gremlins? We got to add that to the list. Dude, Gremlins
I don't think
awesome.
I've seen it in a long time.
Dude, I love Gremlins. Sorry, guys. Welcome to the Gremlins show.
It's basically kind of like multiplying like that. I mean, because I think Tolkien kind of went back and forth on where they corrupted elves, where they corrupted men. At one point, I think, if my understanding is correct, that I don't know what I was about to say, but then he was kind of like, no, they multiply, because Tolkien's whole thing is that evil cannot create, it can only corrupt, right? And so, the idea of two orcs getting it on would still be creating something,
right?
Even though it's coming from corruption. So I think the settled is that orcs just multiply. But in this IGN, go ahead.
Do you think, and maybe this IGN article is going to explain it because I haven't read the article. Do you think that they're going to visually differentiate between the orcs? Because are these pictures from this article? Are these all the female orcs? Like this first one?
That's what I was confused on. I'm not too sure. I'm wondering if they are going to differentiate between them visually in any capacity, or if it's going to be more.
I can imagine
subtle?
I could imagine some sort of like forced exposition where like one of the female orcs makes some sort of comment about always being put down by the male orcs or something like that. Like just something that's not
the patriarchy suppressing us.
Yeah, like something just so not subtle.
The orc patriarchy.
Yeah.
No, please don't. Please do it. Please do it, Amazon. That you need to send a message, and that would be the correct message to send.
It would be really funny. It's just a thought that I had that might be the way. Just, I mean, based on some of the writing that we've seen from some of these other shows, and just how on the nose everything is.
Yes,
that's just what I'm wondering. Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
I mean, that's what made Arcane so great, was the subtlety with everything. But yeah, I'm thinking they're going to try and humanize Sauron and humanize the orcs. I'm assuming, which I think there's if they're going to go the corruption route, I can definitely understand that. But again, it's I think they're going to fall in the trap that Disney's fallen in too many times with trying improperly humanizing the villains.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
All
right, we're not here to talk about how bad Disney is. We're here to talk about how bad Amazon is. So the Rings of Power will be a fresh canvas for the series. It's so fresh that they had to use the Lord of the Rings, offering fans a glimpse of Tolkien's mythical Second Age for the first time. The Second Age, the one that Tolkien wrote the least about and that Amazon doesn't have the rights to. In doing so, Amazon has taken time to rethink many of the familiar elements from Tolkien's world, including orcs. In a new interview with IGN, members of the Rings of Power production team speak in depth on how the new show will portray Lord of the Rings familiar villains. In doing so, they will reveal an interesting revelation. Amazon's new show will have female orcs, which I don't think, even if, let's just say Tolkien had said there were female orcs, which I think there's more arguments towards that there aren't.
Yeah.
Again, no big deal. Even if they were, I don't trust Amazon to do it properly, because they're not showing me they can even handle Galadriel properly, and Elrond properly, and these other characters properly.
I mean,
but
I was just gonna say, like, visually, I don't really. Some of these pictures, like this one that's like the wider shot of them running through the forest, and he's got like the dinosaur bone on his head.
So, you want to talk about let's basically, hang on. I'm gonna pause you right there. The executive producer, Lindsay Weber, says there's some female orcs I truly love, talking about her favorite moments from the series. The rest is up to the imagination of the fans. The origin of the orcs in general has long been a thorny issue for Tolkien mythos, while the movies established that they were elves once, taken by the dark powers, tortured and mutilated, which, again, this is a prequel to that in the universe of the Lord of the Rings film series, right?
Yeah.
But they go on to say the books are far less certain, and they pin, I want to say, to a Reddit thread as their
source.
A freaking Reddit thread.
Of course they do.
As their source.
Dude,
which
IGN.
Is IGN.
Come on,
not
man.
anything credible.
Yeah.
Freaking Reddit.
Of course.
Come on. The Silmarillion, which was edited by Christopher Tolkien, who's J.R.R. Tolkien's son, protected his legacy, loved his father, holds that the villain Morgoth bred orcs from the captured elves in the First Age, but Tolkien himself seems split on the decision, which I found that to be less so. It's very clear that Tolkien settled on the fact that they multiplied. The way I described it to my team, it's a bit like these are baby versions, says Jamie Wilson, head of the Rings of Power prosthetic department. This is what I want to get into. This is what, take away the female orc stuff. Let's get into this bit. So Jamie Wilson, head of the Rings of Power prosthetic department, says, the way I describe it to my team, it's a bit like these are the baby versions. They're not actually babies, but it's them coming out from the darkness. So this is early on. So, for example, if you go to the past films about them, you'll see them and they're quite battle damaged and scarred and all that kind, because there's been lots more battles. This is the kind before the next range of big battles. So there's a lot more smooth texture. There's still wrinkles, lines, shapes, and forms, but they're not so battle scarred. Blah, blah, blah goes on to say that. That's why they're not as dark skinned in these, not necessarily as muscly, not as battle worn and stuff like that. The whole theme of Tolkien, this is where I think that he's off on this, is that the whole theme of Tolkien that you get from the First Age down is that, as each race starts out as powerful as they're ever going to be. And so you see, as for example, as the ages go on, as on a general sense, the men, the elves, the dwarves become not as powerful as the generation before. Same thing with the orcs. The armor isn't as strong as it was the generation before. So that's not to say that there aren't powerful people in the Third Age that are almost as powerful as those in the First Age, but it's kind of like this de-evolution. You know what I mean?
That's actually kind of cool too. Power structures, as far as like power levels for storytelling, is something I've been thinking about a lot, especially after Kenobi, and because I've been watching a lot of anime recently. And though that show, and then there's quite a bit of anime, Naruto in particular, that struggles with power levels, as far as what a lot of writers don't understand is that when you mess with that, whether you create a character and then at some point they jump an insane amount of power, you can never really bring them back down from that. Mm-hmm. And it can really mess with your world building, because then everything has to start equaling up to that. I mean, you could take Dragon Ball Z as an example of like this, what I'm talking about, where a character like Goku, right? He starts out like relatively powerful, but like people can beat him. And then he becomes Super Saiyan, so now he's the most powerful character. So now they have to bring in another character that is potentially more powerful than him, so that they can continue this trend of him rising to the challenge and beating that character. And it's just this continuation, right? And now we're at this point where Dragon Ball Z in particular is in this era of like God mode, Super Saiyan. They have blue hair. And you're like, you get the feeling. And again, this is not to offend Dragon Ball Z lovers. Like, y'all do your thing, enjoy your show. What I'm saying is, it's like from a power level perspective, it just gets to this ridiculous point where it's like, okay. But I think it's really interesting what you're saying, that it's almost the opposite for Tolkien, where the power is being reduced by these groups as time goes on.
Yep, it's even with dragons.
I kind of like that. No one does that.
Yeah, so
it's
you
really
have Smog, but the dragon, but Smog isn't as powerful as the first dragon, and Calagon the Black, right? And so, who was the biggest of the dragons and the most powerful, and so on and so forth. Like with, majority of the elves. I mean, Glorfindel gets reincarnated, so it's a little bit different with him and Galadriel. But I mean, even when you look at the armor and the swords, when the dwarves stumble upon, the Gondolin swords from the First Age, there's a reason why Gandalf says you won't find anything better handcrafted in all of Middle Earth. We don't have these, blacksmiths anymore.
Yeah.
And so, I think he's wrong on this, in my opinion, taking this approach, because it goes against a theme of Tolkien, starting from the most powerful and kind of de-evolving over time.
Yeah, it's like diminishing returns. That's kind of, it's cool.
And I think the makeup on most of the on the orcs look great, but I'm not necessarily digging the costumes and the armor on all of them.
That's what I was kind of getting at. I also, it's, he's talking about them not being battle worn, and I guess it's just because
I don't know why.
Yeah,
dude, there was a huge battle in the huge battles in the First Age.
Yeah,
the War of Daggerath.
Well,
right?
and then he says that, and maybe it's just an odd thing to say, because one of these pictures they show, this orc, it's like close up of this orc, and he's got a helmet on. And he's like, looks like he's growling, or he's showing his teeth to some human. He's got this massive scar on the side of his face, and it looks fresh, right? So I mean, fair enough, I guess. But yeah, it's an odd, kind of an odd thing to say. And then one of the other orcs in here kind of looks like he got some damage, and this could just be from later in the show, but it's an odd detail to point out, that they're like, oh, they're fresh.
I'm sorry, it wasn't. The War of Daggerath is the final battle. In the first, in like the last battle, like think Armageddon in the Bible, and the only war in the First Age, which was a huge war, which basically destroyed the entire land of Beleriand, was the war against Morgoth, which was basically a war that it morphed into a war over the Silmarils. So I think there was like 2 or 3 battles. You had, without getting all the specifics because we don't need to, but yeah, there were many, there was a war of wrath for reasons where the Valar ended up having to come to help the elves, dwarves, and men overcome Morgoth. So, so yeah, that just doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, it's just more articles and more pictures. Yeah. Like, just tired of it. It's like, I guess at least it's not Empire this time or whatever.
Yeah, right.
Putting these shoots out.
And it seems like also they're going to focus on more one-on-one battles with orcs instead of, they said there will be widespread battles, but more kind of, what happens when an orc enters your house? What do? I'm like, you pull out your AR-15. Bah, 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 bah.